Superman Legacy probably has the most amount of pressure out of any comic book movie coming out in the next few years. Like, you know, we got like on the Marvel side with like Kang Dynasty and Secret Wars, and obviously there's a lot of pressure to like implement the comic storyline into live action on whether or not they'll implement Doctor Doom and how they'll pay off the Kang Dynasty storyline, and you know, the bringing in with mutants, Deadpool, etc. But the Marvel brand as a whole isn't really tarnished. Like, I mean, all they really have to do to regain the general public's attention and goodwill, as in comparison to the Infinity Saga, is just get good writers, you know, just get in the good writers that you got from the Infinity Saga and just slow down with the amount of content that you're producing every year. But the DCEU brand specifically has been dead for like God knows how many years now, considering the fact that there hasn't been a single DCEU movie, so not including Joker or Batman, to have crossed over $400 million worldwide in the box office since the first Aquaman movie in 2018. There have been around, I think, 8 or so movies released then under the previous regime, so that includes Blue Beetle. None of them have crossed even close to 400 million. That's really sad. So the general public just really doesn't care for like any mainline, mainstream DCEU interconnected movies, or just the interconnected universe as a whole. Like anything that isn't Batman, just people just don't really care about, because if you can't even handle your primary heavy hitters right, like Batman and Superman in your universe, then why should general audiences be invested in the more obscure / not as well known characters like Blue Beetle or Shazam 2, like hypothetically speaking? So then you come in with James Gunn's reboot with Superman Legacy that not only has to be good, as we haven't gotten a live action Superman movie literally since 2013 with Henry Cavill, but also has to restore the goodwill of the DC brand, as this is the first major movie in this universe. So obviously, like, I want it to be good because, you know, I like Superman, most people do, and we want a proper Superman adaptation, as we haven't gotten one for a while. But it's a matter of, it has to be good. Like, it has no choice but to be successful. Like, this is the backbone of the future DC universe, as they're essentially asking the general public to be reinvigorated and become interested in an entirely new universe with different actors and a completely brand new continuity that builds to something more grand and introduces a plethora of different characters or different iterations of said characters. We're already being introduced into a lived-in universe with heroes already operating like Metamorpho, Green Lantern, Hawkgirl, Mr. Terrific, in which I've seen a lot of people make the same comparison. It's like, oh, Batman vs. Superman did the same thing in which they introduce all these characters. Why is it not any different with Superman Legacy? It seems like it's going to be a mess all over again. And the difference between these two scenarios with introducing heroes in BVS and introducing heroes in Superman Legacy is that they serve two completely different purposes. The way the characters in BVS were introduced was sloppy and rushed, as the entire purpose was just trying to lead to Justice League as soon as possible, not to mention the already overcrowded of a movie it already was, with like adapting The Dark Knight Returns, the death of Superman, you have Lex Luthor in there, setting up Darkseid, and then on top of the fact trying to set up the Justice League. It was literally like an email that Wonder Woman looked at that was sent to her by Bruce. On Superman Legacy's case, James Gunn actually stated himself on Instagram the purpose of this and why you have certain characters being implemented in the Superman Legacy. And most likely they'll probably have like cameo roles or like very minor roles that won't take the spotlight away from Superman. The core cast is definitely going to center around Superman and Lois. This is only to further establish, hey, like there are already heroes here, and use just some of them that give you a good idea of what this universe is like, versus trying to introduce them, like their origins and stuff. And like, hey, they're all gonna team up later to fight Darkseid again. Like it's two completely different scenarios. I'm not really sure what box office numbers it has to hit in order for WB Discovery to consider it a success or something worthy to be invested in, because hypothetically speaking, if it has like a standard $200-ish million budget, if it makes around like 500 million worldwide, technically that's breaking even, but that probably isn't successful in the eyes of WB, as like I said earlier, this is the first major DCU project, as it's introducing majority of the audience to the new DCU. Will it make $1 billion? Probably not, if we're being realistic, but I mean, I could see it making around like 700 million or so if we're taking into account like some of the numbers from Man of Steel and like other DC projects. I guess it just is a matter of, is the general public willing to invest their time into a completely brand new universe, and if they have faith in James Gunn's vision, which I hope they do. I just find it funny how there's also like this group of people mainly pertaining with Snyder bots, or like the Snyder group fandom, that like put out the hashtag fire James Gunn Peter Safran tweet, and it's like, what does this accomplish? Like, we know that you have this weird desire to restore the Snyderverse, even though there's no way, shape, or form that that universe is coming back, when like half of the actors either aren't interested or will have no goodwill with Warner Brothers ever again. And even if they did, James Gunn is obviously rebooting? Why would he go out of his way to bring in any aspect of the Snyderverse? Like, bro, move on. Come on now.
At the end of the day, Ronnie, I am a man. A man who's gay. You like niggas. Get that through your head.
I mean, I can understand concern with the new Superman Legacy movie, but James Gunn has proven himself to be a pretty competent director in specifically the case of comic book related projects. I mean, both the Suicide Squad and Peacemaker have been honestly the best projects in the entire DCEU's iteration. And for the most part, everyone loves the Guardians films. The Guardians 3 did really well, both financially and critically. And for once, it actually seems like we're getting a director for like the DC brand, like associated with like the main DCEU, like excluding Matt Reeves, the Batman, because we all know he, cooked with the Batman and he really gets the character. But it's like a relief that we're getting someone helming a big DC character that actually understands the source material and has demonstrated his vast knowledge of said source material. Like him actually going out of his way to like promote or highlight some of the inspirations from DC Comics increases the sales of those said books, like directly adapting Supergirl, Woman of Tomorrow, or taking inspiration from Warren Ellis's The Authority or the Alan Moore's run on Swamp Thing. I've seen a few people state how Blue Beetle is like the first official DCU project, which isn't the case at all. It's not the case in any way, shape, or form. James Gunn obviously pointed out that anything prior to Creature Commandos and Superman Legacy aren't canon to the new universe, which shouldn't be news. Like Blue Beetle isn't a part of the slate. The character will be continued upon in the DCU along with Peacemaker, like played by John Cena, and Viola Davis as Amanda Waller. All James Gunn said was that the Blue Beetle character would be the first DCU character, but I guess that all it means is that the movie's events would be consistent in like the DCU, but like you don't have to watch the Blue Beetle movie in order to continue on with the DCU. You don't have to watch anything prior to the DCU in order to watch Chapter 1 Gods and Monsters projects.
Relatively, the MCU and now the DCU in film, which really doesn't start. I mean, the first DCU character for sure is Blue Beetle, and the first full DCU movie is Superman. Now that that's happening, it's relatively new. The same thing with Marvel. I mean, even MCU is relatively new. So I don't know if there's any innate things about tone, because I think that what both MCU and DCU need to do is to have a wider range of tones than they presently do.
I guess except for Peacemaker Season 1, which is another kind of sort of convoluted thing. How is he gonna address the fact that the DCEU Justice League made a big cameo at the end of Peacemaker Season 1, but Peacemaker Season 2 is currently being written by James Gunn and takes place in the DCU, and he stated that it would be addressed. So it's like, are they just gonna completely ignore it? Or like, is it gonna be retconned? Or are they gonna just say, hey, it was like Corenswet Superman that was in that scene instead of Henry Cavill? It's a little odd. And by that logic, wouldn't Peacemaker technically be the first DCU character because he showed up prior to the DCU? Or even with that, shouldn't Amanda Waller technically be the first DCU character as she showed up all the way back in Suicide Squad? I don't know. There's a little weird consistencies going on, but I don't think it's a big deal that characters like Blue Beetle, Peacemaker, Amanda Waller characters, or those actors are staying, because it's like they're not the backbone of the DC universe. Keeping any Justice League member would be problematic, as stated by me in previous videos or by other content creators, because it's like new universe, new continuity. You need fresh new faces. If you have Gal Gadot interacting with David Corenswet's Superman, or whoever they choose the Batman for the Brave and the Bold, that confuses not only general audience, but us fans too. It's like, what is this? And even though I think this is very unlikely, as James Gunn has demonstrated his knowledge on how to tackle the Superman character, but in the rare chance that Superman Legacy doesn't do well for whatever reason, it's kind of curious on like what they decide to do afterwards, because like they can't reboot again. Like this is really their only option. It's not a matter of, oh, if it doesn't do well, we'll do this. Like no, like you have no other choice. Like you're not gonna reboot for the third time. People just wouldn't care anymore. And you can only do so many Elseworld stories that are only centered around like Batman characters. So the only option is to go all in with the universe, and whether it works or not. I also think it's pretty much a wise decision to like focus on characters that weren't big in the previous DCE, with the exception of Batman and Superman. So like characters like Flash, Aquaman, maybe the Shazam character. We might not see them for like the first few years of the DCU to kind of give the breathing room, that give a better transition into the DCU, as Superman's appearances in the DCE were so minuscule that James Gunn was ready to recast the character. Like it's kind of crazy to think about. All I know is as we get into the next few months, marking the beginning of 2024, interesting news are about to arise from this new DC universe, as currently the movie's supposed to start shooting in January 2024. Now we're gonna get those, hopefully some pretty good set photos if they shoot on location. Obviously some more casting announcements with Lex Luthor, Jimmy Olsen, maybe the Kents, but more importantly on the fact that hopefully we get a Superman movie that accurately represents the character and gives Superman fans the movie that they've deserved for like the past decade now.